I am Jason Kennedy. This is Keating. We are Blue Box Cloud. We do managed OpenStack. Today we're going to talk a little bit about automating some common tasks in OpenStack, namely some tasks in Vagrant, using Vagrant to interact with your OpenStack cloud, and using Ansible to do the same. So I guess first things first, I'm assuming that everybody here knows what Vagrant is. You can create virtual operating environments on your machine, custom VMs, do fun things, cool things. So I will be using Vagrant. So I guess I'll jump right into this. Oh my God, this is so, sorry. I was not prepared for tiny screen. So what I wanted to show everyone first is, actually I'll go back to the browser for a second. I am using, are you raising your hand? Okay, so that's a good point. At any point, feel free to raise your hand, speak up, and ask any question that you would like. I am going to be using the Vagrant OpenStack plugin. There's a separate one called the Vagrant OpenStack Provider. Actually, I'm using Provider, not plugin. That's interesting to note. So you can do some different things with these, but Vagrant out of the box doesn't actually. You can't use. You can't set up OpenStack as a provider. So on that note, what we do is this looks like your typical. It's a piece of a stack.rc file, and this is what you use. So this is the actual Vagrant file that you're using for configuration, and we have hard-coded these values in to be able to interact with the cloud using just our Vagrant. So
these credentials won't work after this afternoon. Please don't mess around with them right now.
Right. Yes, please. So let's see. Let me go back to.
This isn't live streaming, right?
It is live streaming? No? Okay. He was nodding. Okay, let's see. On this one too? Yeah, I did.
It does it per tab.
Does it really?
Yeah.
God, that's awful. Okay. How does that look? I mean, obviously it's terrible, but it is workable? Okay. Okay. So I guess I'm just going to jump right into it. So I have, as I mentioned, my Vagrant file set up to use OpenStack as a provider. So in any normal situation, you would do the provider OpenStack line, assuming that OpenStack was one of your defined providers in your Vagrant file. It'll actually work without it, but. So what I'm actually doing right now is I'm going to spin up the default, I think it's an M1, M1 small instance. That's also hard-coded in the Vagrant file. And it is going to talk to my OpenStack, which I think I'm running somewhere special. Not you. Not you. There we go. Okay, you. Everybody see my Gchat? Okay. So I probably need to log back into that. So we can see that it has already been assigned a floating IP, which we just told it which network where the floating IPs were located, and it grabs the first one that's available, and then sets up my instance on OpenStack. And I can go look. It's probably going to make me re-log in. No one look at my password, please. Yeah, I know. Is this tab tiny? Okay. Well, I guess I can destroy one and build it again, so you can see that this was.
Just give it a command plus and it'll make it a little better.
Yeah, you want to see that too. But you can see it's been running for 0 minutes. It's not going to let me move over.
So Vagrant, it created a key pair for you as it made it up, so that you could just Vagrant SSH into it without dealing with that bit.
So I'm going to Vagrant SSH. There we go, and I'm in. So if I take a look at, you can see I am 206, so this is my instance. If I can ping, I have an outside IP address. I'm existing in that OpenStack cloud. The let's see, the OpenStack, the Vagrant OpenStack provider, actually I'm using provider. The other provisioning tool allows you to interact with, you can make a snapshot of an instance. I know that they're adding to them all the time. There's been a bunch of forks to that particular project. It was started by Rackspace. So the other options that you can do from here, I guess I'll do a new tab here. Where am I sitting? Okay. You can do Vagrant. Oh, son of a, I am not going to get that. Is that good? I'm assuming that's good. To look at my commands that are available to me. So it's a small list now, like I said, but it's being grown all the time. And if you want to add to it, I'm sure that the parties that are writing would appreciate it. But let's do image. Oh wait, let's do volume list. And this is going to show me the volumes that have been created by my user on my tenant. So there's a volume. So you're interacting directly with the OpenStack API in this case, and you know all these commands do fun things that you would expect to do just at the CLI if you're playing directly with OpenStack.
Yeah. So the point being, if you're already a Vagrant user and suddenly you gain access to a cloud, you don't really have to change a whole lot. You can point your Vagrant at the cloud, and that way you carry that thing forward. You develop locally, Vagrant it locally, Vagrant it out at the cloud, test it bigger, or Vagrant it out to production if that's your thing.
Because all you really need to do is add a new provider to your Vagrant file, and you just run it at instantiation, and you're good to go with the Vagrant up. And then it's just your simple process to do. Do I need to do it every time here? No. Just go higher again.
Did you say that OpenStack is? Yeah, I don't think OpenStack is one of the default out-of-the-box providers.
Not.
Is there some work to make that happen? Like, is that, or is
So
the
a guy
is fighting that?
No, so there was a third-party person who wrote one to deal. There was a third-party person who wrote one to deal with the Rackspace public cloud because he wanted a Vagrant into Rackspace, and he named it the Rackspace thing. But Rackspace is just OpenStack for the most part. So there's been a numerous forks of that to take out the Rackspaceisms and make it more OpenStack-y. We're not entirely certain who's the winning fork, or who will be the winning fork, or which is going up towards HashiCorp or not. But the happy end goal would be that one of them wins and gets into HashiCorp, and then it just becomes a provider out of that.
Okay. Yeah. So there's still some decisions that have to be made around that, but it is a work in progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we can run our destroy, and it sends it directly to, and we will see that. I think I need to make this a little bit, yeah.
It's gone.
And we're gone, and we're back to fresh. So I think that the one that I'm using, if you do a Vagrant status, I think it's going to show me it still. So it leaves some chunkage that you need to clean up, yeah. But, you know, it works, and it's fun. If you like playing with Vagrant, sure, yeah.
The image list is actually listing the images OpenStack.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
And when you do Vagrant up or Vagrant, when you do anything with Vagrant, it's not downloading the image to your version, right?
It is actually. So I am using. You can see that I'm using the Ubuntu image. It's hard coded in here, and I'm using an M1 small instance. But you could use. And these are just all the publicly available images that are available to my tenant. And I could use any of these images and code it in and boot anything I wanted to.
Can you also create an image like on your load box without putting up the OpenStack?
Yeah, because you would just change your provider to VirtualBox or whatever it was that you were using. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You want to switch over to... And I do apologize for the screen size. I was not prepared for the Epson.
Just cleaning out everything.
Okay.
You know, for a fresh start. So I'll have to go through the same make the screen work dance, but bear with me.
Oh, yeah.
Super tiny. Display, there it is. Were we settling on 720p?
Yeah, because it was better than. Yeah, that's as good as it's gonna get, I think.
Awesome. All right, just make a new one, make it big. That looks pretty good.
Yeah, that's not bad.
All right, so my part of this is the Ansible side of things. Is anybody not familiar with Ansible? Would like a little refresher? Saw almost a hand come up, but not quite. Okay. So Ansible is a very simple but powerful automation tool. It's based on SSH. There's no agents outside. You write a playbook in YAML on your local machine, and you give it an inventory of things that you can reach, which include localhost, and say go, and it goes and does the things that you want it to do in an orderly fashion with idempotence, so you can do it over and over again without destroying all your stuff. One of the cool things you can do with Ansible is create new infrastructure against, say, a public cloud. And there are a number of modules that have been submitted to Ansible. Modules are little pieces of Ansible code that do the nice things that have been written to work with OpenStack clouds over time. Originally, there was Rackspace clouds again, but then we've rewritten them all to be more generic. And so what I'm going to do is show some of the new modules that we have that'll be in the 2.0 release of Ansible that will do some of these cool things. So first, we're going to look at the playbook. All of the Ansible stuff is in YAML for how you interact with things. So we have a playbook here. And I've broken this down into two kind of blocks of things. There is a create all the things play that's going to be creating some security groups and creating an instance and some volumes, or a volume, and we'll attach the volume to the instance. So some of this was hidden in the Vagrant. I had made a security group behind the scenes in the Vagrant file. We just referenced that security group. In the Ansible case, we're assuming nothing is there for my tenant, and we're creating all of it from scratch.
One little thing to note, if you create instances on your OpenStack cloud with Vagrant and then terminate them via another method, whether it be Ansible or from Horizon or from the CLI, be aware that it causes strange state issues that you have to go clean up manually sometimes because Vagrant is very unhappy about it.
Vagrant wants to own it all, yeah. All right, so we've got a module call here called OS Security Group, and it's going to take in a block of auth data. This could have come from environment variables, or you could source or reference an authentication or a credentials file, so that you don't have to type it out every single time. But for expediency, I just typed it out every single time. And all we're doing is creating a security group by the name of OSDS. Next, we're creating a set of rules. Ansible does things in order. Oh, we're doing this on the local host because my local host is the host that can talk to the cloud, because we don't have a cloud instance yet, so we're doing everything locally. Now that we have the group, because it does things in order, this task happens before the next task, we can create the rule for the group. Again, we're duplicating the auth method and referencing the security group of OSDS that we created above. And now we're passing in a couple of different things. And this is kind of a fun little block. It's using some new features of Ansible, namely the omit filter. So I need to create two security groups that I care about. I want a group for ICMP so that ping and the rest of the things that make the internet work great will work with my instance. And ICMP doesn't need a port range at all. It just needs to have ICMP and everything in. But then I also want to let in SSH. SSH is TCP, which means it has a port range minimum, port range maximum. So the looping mechanism, this withdict, is going to loop twice, once for this ICMP hash and once for this SSH hash. And those values will get subbed in here with item. Item.value.protocol is going to get used every single time. So every loop will have ICMP as one entry, and then TCP is the next loop. For port range min and port range max, we're going to look for item.value.port range min or port range max. And then if they don't exist, which is where this default filter comes in, we want to omit the entire argument. So it's a fun way of being able to not pass an argument in if that piece of data doesn't exist. Otherwise, this would have been a weird set of tasks. So presumably that would run twice. We get the 2 rules. Then now we can move on to launching the instance. Launching the instance has a few more arguments to it. We're doing the OS server module, repeating the auth again. We're going to hardcode the flavor of 2. We're going to hardcode an image name of Ubuntu 14.04. We're going to tell it to use this SSH key that presumably already exists, because I didn't put in a task to make it, so I lied a tiny bit earlier. Key name of OSDS, so that I can SSH into it. And then the security groups is a comma-separated list of security groups that we want to be created. Additionally, we want to tell it to create the network using the internal network name. In case there was multiple networks that were available to me, we want that one. We don't want it to automatically create a floating IP. There's a small bug there. And then we're going to give it a name of OSDS demo1. And then we're going to register the result of that to make use in the next task. So presumably this task completes. We have a new server. Some of the details about it got stuffed in this boot variable. Another great thing about Ansible, you can use data generated from one task in the next task, or later tasks. And that's exactly what we're going to do with this OS floating IP. OS floating IP is a standalone way of creating and attaching a floating IP to an instance. In our particular cloud, the only way to get to it from the internet is to give it a floating IP. Now we're going to reference the external network, because that's the pool that has our floating IPs. We're going to reference the OSDS demo1 server, because we're presuming that there's only one. We're going to allow reuse of an already allocated floating IP. And then we're also going to hard code which floating IP to put in there, because again, I found a bug in this module. So we've hard coded a floating IP of this right here. So we know that every single time it's going to get this IP address. Otherwise, it would just select one from the pool, or add one to the pool if it wasn't already there, and give you the data back. Because this particular module doesn't yet handle the case where a floating IP was already attached, I only want to do it once. So I'm only going to do it when the previous task, which was booting the instance, resulted in a change. If it resulted in a change, then go ahead and add a floating IP address. If it didn't result in a change, ergo the instance was already there, don't attempt to add a floating IP address. Following that, we want to add a volume. OS volume will make a call into whatever your volume service is. We're giving it a couple tiny arguments here, a display name and a size, and that we want it to be present. Some of these I forgot to put state equals present. The default for those is that you're asking it for it to be present rather than absent. And then once the volume is created, we can then attach it to the server that we've created, OSDS demo1. The volume is the volume name, state equals present as well. And then there's a quick little debug to show the floating IP. So we'll get into the deletion in a moment. I have tagged everything in this particular playbook with the tag create. So I can run this playbook referencing just that tag and just get those tasks. And I'm going to do that now. And I'm doing it in a Python virtual environment with Bex. You can just ignore that. Ansible playbook, I'm referencing my host file, which, because you have to have a host file, even though there's nothing of note in there. Feeding it the playbook, I want some extra verbosity, and I only want to run the create tags. So there it made the security group and the rules. Yellow, or that yellowish color, means a change. The blue is what it's going to do. The yellow is the result of that, because I'm running the extra verbosity. Now we're waiting on the instance to launch. There it launched. We're going to assign it a floating IP address. Got assigned. Creating the volume. Attaching the volume. For some reason, attaching the volume takes longer than almost everything else. Don't know why.
So,
Yeah, could be. And then we're just dumping out the floating IP so I can quickly copy it. If everything was right, I should be able to ping this, and I can, and I should be able to SSH into it. However, because this is a brand new one, nope, that's not it. There we go. I've been reusing this IP address, so presumably the I did clean it between my last run. I was going to say that the SSH ID would have changed because it's a brand new server, but apparently I cleaned that key out of my stuff anyway. So yay for demos. I should have a volume attached here. It's going to show up as VDB. That's that 10 gig volume that we asked for. I could do stuff with it if I wanted to. I'm not going to.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Regarding your playbook there. Is there any? You said this is going to be Ansible 2.0 stuff.
Some of these modules have landed in the develop branch of Ansible, and they didn't get backported to 1.9, which is the current release. They will most likely, or they will be in the 2.0 release.
Is there any concept of states here? So like if you change like your security group or something like that, like does it still blow through everything line by line, like go through?
It does.
Playbook?
Yeah, so the way the Ansible works, it will attempt every single task unless there is a conditional that tells it not to do that.
Or you're just like saying run these tags or something.
Yeah, or you say run these tags.
Yeah.
So if I run this again, if I run it again, we'll see something a little bit different. We see greens instead of yellows, and we see it taking a lot less time to complete. So the concept, except for the one where we had a conditional, we just saw that went to skipped. It didn't try to assign the floating IP address because the previous task was a green task. It was not changed. The model with Ansible is do everything all the time, just do it quickly. And that works pretty darn well and saves you from trying to create a state machine in its head and figure it all out. Excuse you.
Jesse,
Yeah.
why did you have that conditional for the floating IP? To demo it, or is that not a idempotent?
I found out today that it's not an idempotent task. That was a little. I'm going to fix this before the next release. Thanks. I reviewed that module. Whoops. So one of the things I could do. So I've created all this stuff, but I'm still just working on localhost. Now that I have a chance to SSH into it, I could do another task, which adds it to my runtime inventory. I'm changing a read-only file. Great. And I already have another file. So I could do a thing like I think it's add host. Yep. Add host, name OSDS demo1 groups. I don't even have to give it a group. And then anything else I pass along is going to be variable data. So Ansible SSH host could be the result of VIP, or the variable data VIP. And I don't know if I can give it a SSH key. So this isn't, oh, that might work. Okay, let's see if this works. This may not work, but it might. So you can add hosts on the fly with Ansible and then make use of them in a later play. So I'm going to make a new play. And instead of localhost, I'm going to do OSDS demo1 as the hosts. Gather facts false, because I don't really care about the data that's on there. we'll just do a quick command over SSH to echo something and see if this still works. Tags, I'm just going to cheat and use the create tag as well and rerun this with create. So this may work, may not. We shall see. FIP, not VIP.
That was cast and none of you guys caught that. So.
Yeah. That's why live demos are
I
great.
thought it was just an important command.
Very important command.
And so just to confirm,
Uh-huh.
you're using the Ansible there to talk to the Blue Box OpenStack environment to generate the images.
Yeah.
And then you're going back in with Ansible into the instance you've actually created and then start doing configuration with it.
Yeah. So it actually tried to do it, and it failed because it's trying to SSH as myself instead of the user. I think that's the right thing. So Ansible is talking locally, executing those module pieces locally, because I have the software installed locally to deal with it. Ideally, what's going to happen is once I've added it to my runtime inventory, everything after that it'll actually be SSHing out to that instance we just created, then operating as that. And there it did. That actually worked. So it was able to SSH in. The command said echo hello world. That's the result that we got out of it. The std out was hello world. So that's presumably from there you can do all sorts of stuff with your instance and then get rid of it at the end if you want to get rid of it. In fact, that's the next play that I have is the delete the things play. And this looks a lot like the top one. Again, it's operating on localhost and it's got a different tag. A lot of the same stuff is being passed along. Now, I could have reduced a lot of this down to just the server ID instead of the server name, and then it doesn't care about the other details because the server ID is a server ID. There's only ever one. But since I'm using names, there could be more than one, so you have to give it as many details as possible to try and save against collisions. So here we're doing state absent instead of present. So we delete the server, which allows us then to delete the volume, because if you try and delete the volume that's attached, it'll break. Then we can delete the security group, because if you try and delete the security group that's instance is running on, it'll yell at you. And by deleting the security group, we've also deleted all the rules. So all we really have to do is target server, volume, and group, and then everything will be cleaned out. So I will run this, and instead of create, we're going to do delete. And the default for this module is to wait for the action to complete, so it's polling in the background. You can tell it not to wait and do whatever else you want in that aspect. So it said it deleted, then everything else got deleted. We could run it again and it would be a lot faster. Delete me harder. Oh, except that another thing that I need to fix before the next release. Apparently deleting a volume that doesn't exist. Should have just said, no, I can't delete that, but make note of that one. This does mean, though, that if I reran the create tag, everything should work, except when I try to SSH in, I'm going to get a host key conflict. So let's see that in action. We'll get yellows instead of greens now because we're recreating everything.
You can just pass the command for SSH to say ignore.
I could, yeah. Yeah.
Or an alias for that.
Yeah, and I think there's even
You can put in your config file as well.
Yeah.
On every system.
every system. Yeah, there's ways around it.
It's better to just do it for like systems that are going to be.
Yeah, a very small subset of your very ephemeral systems.
Put a wildcard in
Yeah.
the end and then dump them to dev null.
Yeah, you could do that as well. And then you tell Ansible to automatically accept new host keys because every time it's going to be a new host key. So it did. It got all the way to the here, but it had an error connecting into it. Actually, this has connection refused rather than
Ready yet.
should have been ready, but that's live demos for you.
Now, so if you've got loads of different team members using these files to make
Uh-huh.
changes, make updates, what would you use as your kind of almost approval flow process? So would you use
Yeah.
something like Jenkins, or what would you do so that literally engineers were dumping these files in and there was a bit of a check and approve process?
Right. So the great thing about Ansible is it gives power to just about everybody, and the terrible thing about Ansible is it gives power to just about everybody. And there are ways that you can constrain that down. Jenkins is a really good example. You could set up your infrastructure such that only the Jenkins host can SSH into your nodes, or only the Jenkins host has the cloud credentials to create those things, so all the runs have to go through Jenkins.
Yeah.
And then the only way to get it into Jenkins is to commit it to a code repository, so you do peer review on it,
Yeah.
and then you have Jenkins do all your stuff. Ansible also sells a product called Tower, and Tower is kind of like a Jenkins for Ansible on steroids. Does a bunch of really cool stuff. It shows all kinds of tracking of who's ran which playbooks on these hosts, and a lot of audit trail. As things are going, you get to watch all the tasks happen, and there's pretty graphs and things like that. But it is a for-pay product, and it's a per-host licensing model. I think it's free for 10 hosts if you want to just play around with it.
But if you're using something like Jenkins, you could potentially use it for a whole lot of different
You could.
information tasks.
You really could, yeah. You just don't get quite the same level of integration with
No,
it.
that's it. You
Yeah.
get a broader spectrum than with
You very much do, and that's the model that we typically use. Is we have it through Jenkins and we do peer review on the code. But I mean, it's pretty powerful for what you want to do,
Yeah.
and you can point it not just at OpenStack but everything. So kind of like Vagrant, you might already be using it. Now you get to use Vagrant on OpenStack. Ansible, you might already be using it. Now you get to use OpenStack on or Ansible on OpenStack. As far as modules are concerned. OS. So we only really care about the OS underscore. Let me. Get rid of those. So there's a bunch of different functionalities right now. Creating client configuration files, the things that you source to do things, floating IPs, images. There's some ironic things. I could have used the OS key pair to create that SSH key in the first place. Creating networks, flavors, creating objects in Swift. Like there's a ton of different functionality, but there's still a lot left to be done as well. Almost every single one of these OS underscores are making use of the shade library. The shade library is a thing that OpenStack Infra created because they were tired of dealing with all the weirdness between different public clouds. And so shade hides a lot of that behind the scenes. So you say, I want a server that's reachable by the internet, and shade figures out what that actually means on that actual cloud. So all these use shade. If you want to add more functionality to the Ansible modules, that might mean adding more functionality to shade, but it's a pretty open project for those type of things. So hopefully we're going to land a bunch more before the 2.0 release, but still there's a pretty decent set of functionality here that you can start off with and do the things with your cloud, not just as a consumer, but some of these are really useful as a operator as well. All right, that's my part.
Awesome. Did anybody else have any questions for us? No?
Awesome. So we're going to get you out of here a little.
With 8 minutes to spare before
8 minutes
drinking.
to spare. They want us all to gather at the big room in the where all
crystal
the crystal
something.
room,
Yeah.
whatever it's called, where all the keynotes were, and then from there we'll move on. So thank you.
Thanks.
Well,